Hey everyone, it's time for Catalog and Cocktails, your honest, no BS, non salesy conversation about enterprise data management with tasty beverages in hand. I'm Tim Gasper, longtime product guy, data nerd, joined by Juan Cicada. Hey Juan.
Hey Tim, how are you doing? Look, it is finally we're doing this live
hmm
Wednesday, 4 p.m. U.S. Central. It's been a long time since we've done this live. Like, actually, I should check that we are live, but let's assume we are live right now. Um, I think the last time we did something live was last April. Life is really changing. And okay, and
Except
then
for our little rants. We've been doing
oh
some
yeah,
live
that's the new
rants.
thing.
Yeah.
But live Wednesday at 4 p.m. Central thing is we haven't done that in a long time. And today, I am super freaking excited that we're able to go actually get our guest today live. Is Nachiket Mehta, who is the VP of AI and data engineering. He is a very well trotted data leader and executive, and somebody who I've met multiple times at the CDOIQ conference, and is somebody who I really enjoy following on LinkedIn, just having these conversations because he's somebody who can go deep into the weeds, but also bring it back all the way up to the what I call to the penthouse, to the boardroom level. Nachiket, how are you doing? It is such a pleasure to have you here finally, and we're here live.
Pleasure to
Welcome.
be here. Thanks for having me. I'm doing great.
No, it's a
Glad
long
to be
time
here.
coming. So, before we kick it off, our tell and toast, what are we drinking and what are we toasting for?
I'm drinking on Wine Wednesday. It's the flavor of wine, sangria. It's to make it a cocktail for a special company here.
Nice. I
Nice.
like your glass, by the way. It looks like a disco ball.
Credit goes to my wife. She picks all this.
I love this Wine Wednesday. I actually can't believe we never did something like that. But
I know. For as much as Juan likes wine.
What are you drinking?
Tim, how about you?
I am drinking. I've had a trend lately of doing tequila-oriented cocktails. So this is actually a riff on a tequila old fashioned. It's a tequila nonino old fashioned. So anejo tequila. It's got amaro nonino in it, some agave, a little bit of agave syrup, and some orange bitters. So very tasty. What about you, Juan?
All right, so this is baptized by ChatGPT. It's called Ashes and Orange. People can watch it. It's orange because it's a bit like, again, an old fashioned twist. I have my liquor 43 and I have my Aperol, which is what gives it the orange, the Aperol, and that's kind of my sweet. I have Angostura bitters, and then I have a bourbon. It's called Willet, I think, and then I top it off with some Port Charlotte to give it that smokiness and the ashes in there right now. So a very boozy, a little bit sweet, but not too sweet, floral. I'm enjoying
This
this.
is a fancy cocktail episode. I don't think we've been this fancy before.
Yeah, no, because we're back live. So anyways, cheers. What are we toasting for? Nachiket, what do you want to toast for?
Toast. See, ontology has become a lot buzzword, right? But I think I'm toasting for a good company here and talk about, like you say, like into the details or the high level, right? Wherever it leads us. This is an honest
Awesome.
no BS.
Love
Awesome.
it.
All right, cheers. Hmm. Okay, so let's just dive in here. Honest, no BS. What is this Jarvis for? Enterprise Insights. You've been actually posting about this stuff for a while on LinkedIn. I think people who are listening and have not been following you, you should go look you up on LinkedIn and see some posts that you've had. So tell us a little bit more about this.
Yeah, so I started writing like sometime last year, right? And you were actually for one of the first ones, one, right? Like when we were talking about a lot of work, innovative work we did at Wayfair, and we socialized a lot of this concept internally through internal writing and kind of executive approval and all this like detailed white papers. But and you say like, hey, this is very innovative work, right? You should like post in public, let's so that others kind of benefit from it. And you were not one of the first ones, right? I kind of heard that a lot, but that's where like I was like, let me share all that experience that we did, right? And I was lucky to be working at Wayfair, a little more modern, digital, advanced, and so we were trying a lot of things that was like first of its kind. In the industry. So I was like, yeah, let me share that with the audience. And I started receiving good feedback, right? So when I did not intend to write the Jarvis for Enterprise Insights as a series, right? I just wrote one article and got really good traction and repost. So I was and a lot of people reached out saying, can you double click into that? So that's where I started double clicking into that and the importance of the data foundations, the importance of that ontology or the context layer as we talk about, and how you really want to drive the creation of that agent, right? Like inspiration comes from the Iron Man Jarvis, right? Who you just talk, right? There's no chatting, there's no typing, and it understands you really, really well. What's happening, what's not happening. And so I named that as an agent, like a Jarvis, and then started writing how you can create a Jarvis for yourself or enterprise.
So dive us into that. So what are the steps that you go into? I'd like to unpack this, and also if you can share with the work that you've done previously and how this all aligns and how it's inspired you to get here.
Yeah, so learned a lot from failures, right, and bad experiments. But I think what really resonated well. So I'll tell you a story, right? Like at Wayfair, when I joined, like I was there for 6 years, we were trying to solve like traditional KPI, the metrics layer, the semantic layer problem, right? The executives were not getting consistent definitions, right? The data to insights to decision making was poor to a certain extent. You get various definitions to drive that insights and make decisions. When we started looking into those KPIs, it was not the KPI and metrics definition problems. It was really driving, when I started digging into it, it was really the meaning and identity of the data, right? So that's when okay, maybe we need to define what is an order, what is a delivery rate. On-time delivery rate means it's like order to delivery, but what do you call a delivery, right? Is it really when the customer, like when the first delivery attempt was done, like in the name of furnitures, and whether you kind of consider that? But what if customer was not home? You were on time to delivery, but customer was not home, and now you are doing reattempt. Same thing applies to shipping, right? In the fulfillment shipping, what deported your trailer deported versus like it went out of your warehouse. So there are a lot of those nuances that we came across when just solving those basic KPI definition issues, right? So we connected that to the real world events, right? Let's see what happens on the ground. And so when we partner with our operations teams, like created Tiger team thanks to the executive sponsorship, we started uncovering a lot of issues tied back to the things that are happening on the ground and how they are mapped or not mapped to the system of events, right? So the actual physical events versus system of events. And so that led us to this whole, I say, shift left and unraveling that you need to have solid data foundations, not just within the data teams, but partnering with the true source of record, the data owners, and how you take them along the journey, solve not just the KPI problems, but we solve a lot of business problems along the way where it impacted forecasting and planning. It impacted our lost in transit, right? So I'm talking supply chain ecosystem. That's where we really drove this ontology-driven foundation concept. And thankfully, like, so I led data mesh. This turned into like more federated, domain-oriented implementation. And then when the Gen AI came, we were ready with this good, solid foundations because we built the ontology, the events, all of that, so that when our first attempt of POC chatbots started hallucinating, we're like, hey, wait a minute, we built this, we solved this problem for a different purpose. Let's see if we can provide that context to get the better output, right? And that's where we really saw a lot of that investment paying off. So overall, all that experience kind of niched into this strategic multi-layer execution strategy that I'm trying to share with everyone.
That is so interesting. So you kind of figured out ahead of time, a little bit ahead of the market, like what it means to be, people are talking about, I got to be AI ready or AI ready data or something like that. Is that essentially kind of this data foundation, is that you've figured out that that's what you need and what some of the key ingredients are that are part of that?
So I wouldn't say I figured it out, right? We learned, like I said, we learned from many attempts. Credit goes to my boss at the time, right? He's an ex-MIT guy. He has worked with ontologists before, the library science, the true RDF, like it goes back. And he was like, he tried this, right? So we decided, okay, let's hire an ontologist, right? So this is like 4 years ago. So we hired an ontologist, mapped our tuples, right? The domain, the noun, and verb, within the supply chain ecosystem. And that's where we started mapping those on the ground events to this systematic events and mapping that to the data. And that's where we started seeing a lot of this dividends paid. But the data foundation at itself, like we're still like solving problem without taking culture in mind, the change management in mind. So yes, there are certain technical problems we solve, which we realized and learned that it was 20% of the overall problem or the solution, right? It was really 80% was the bigger change management that I had to do. So I learned the hard way to your question.
Yeah. Okay, so a couple of things I want to unpack here. Definitely let's dive into the change management in a second, but one of them is I like how you said, well, we identified these issues of mismatch of meaning, but you actually went to like the boots on the ground, the reality of figuring out, because I think everybody who's listening here who use a catalog, who thinks about this stuff, are like, yes, we need to have well-defined metrics, otherwise we'll have different, like, I think everybody understands that, right? And the problem of having to, but then the so what? It's like, we need to tie this to like, okay, the numbers don't match, but so what? But I think you actually said like we were able to trace it back down to particular events, back boots on the ground in reality to saying, okay, here is the so what. So I would love if you can share two things. One is kind of that process of finding that so what that other people can kind of listening can saying, okay, I should be following that. And an example of a very concrete example of a so what here, that something that was quantifiable.
Yeah, so the process we follow. So we establish an end-to-end visibility initiative, right? So the way we were operating is more like STO, single-threaded ownership culture, which was more like vertical, like so your business, your technology product, people on the ground, like everyone working together. But there was no notion of end-to-end visibility, so more horizontal, right? So if I take supply chain as an example, our operating model, our business model was that we get stuff from suppliers or manufacturers over the ocean out of US, right? Mostly in Asia, over the ocean, freight forwarding, goes to the warehouses, then travels within the fulfillment life cycle, transportation, and last mile delivery to the customer, and sometimes even returns, right? So when we started mapping that, there was no single work stream that connected everything horizontally. So we partnered, so this end-to-end work stream started mapping, started doing a lot of warehouse visits, on-the-ground visits, talking to the operators and saying, hey, explain what exactly happens, right? Like when you move boxes within warehouses, where do you move it? And then connected that to the systems that we had in place, right? The warehouse management system, the transportation management system, all that, to say, are we really logging these events? And in certain cases, we found out that we did not. Right? So when we connected this problem to the business problem, and when we say, hey, we are paying millions of dollars when customer complains that I have not received my order, and when we trace back as part of customer service, it's tagged as lost in transit. So we took that as a business problem saying, hey, this is multi-million-dollar lost in transit problem. We mapped all these events into happy path and unhappy path. Right? Happy path is that if it goes through this ideal channels, this series of events needs to happen. 15, 20, 25 events needs to happen. Unhappy path, a lot of exceptions happen. You're not capturing all those exceptions. And if you're capturing, you're not connecting it centrally. So that's what we started mapping, and we identified these anomalies. And that's where we identified, hey, there was this trailer left in the yard, but nobody got the next event to pick it up and unload that trailer. And then it was sitting there for many, many days. And now customers promised that they were going to receive goods within a week. They've been waiting for months, and we have to now reship certain goods to them. That's cost to us. So when we added, and we are talking like big furniture items and household items that cost hundreds of dollars, right, per item. So when we took this as a problem, it became like a $35 million problem, right? So we were like, okay, let's just fix it with this ontology, mapping all these events to the systems, identifying anomalies, and we solved that problem. And that got a lot of traction, right? And once we got that traction, it was less about the KPIs that we are fixing. It's more about the meaning and the actual events that we are trying to address to fix this business problem. And then more and more business problems started coming, right? Hey, our forecasting is poor, right? So can we leverage that into forecasting and planning? Returns processing is not there, right? So that's where it kind of spiraled up further into supply chain, and then it spiraled further into the overall customer service and then other enterprise functions.
I love this. A couple things to follow up here. One is, is it accurate to say that mapping out this happy path like that effectively is kind of the starting point of that ontology, that map that you're just describing?
That's correct. Yeah. So I was at that point, we were not trying to build ontology. Right?
Yeah.
The effort was really that, hey, we want to build an event-driven system. So we started building event-driven system, but when we hired this ontologist, like he brought that ontology view and he kind of created this into like a tuple, right? This is, hey, we have domains, right? Just take supply chain as a domain, but subdomains, right? We have this inbound, fulfillment, outbound, transportation, and returns domains. What series of activities happened? Let's map that to identities, right? What are your nouns? So we map them to the nouns and the verbs, that the activities that happens: deported, placed, staged, moved, delivered, right? All those verbs. So that created that ontology tuple for us, and we started. That's how we got on the ontology.
So then, how much of this, you said, literally? I know we talk about boots on the ground, like a figurative, but this is like literally you're going off to a warehouse to see things, and you have your own boots on the ground. You're like, is that literally what happened? You'd actually have data people, data teams, or the ontologists going to these actual physical warehouses, or how are they learning about this to go be able to create that map?
Yeah, so yes and no, right? So our ontologist made certain visits to certain our fulfillment centers or last mile locations, but it was this tiger team effort, the end-to-end visibility team, which was more from operations. They made a lot of these visits and they created process maps, and those process maps turned into a graph eventually. When we came back to the corporate and started mapping everything out, that's where we started building the graph, the happy path, unhappy path, and then started mapping that into the systematic events that needs to associate it with the actual trigger, the Kafka events or the PubSub event that needs to happen. And then we leverage that to bring the data into your data assets and build a data product. So we kind of connected all of that eventually all together.
That's pretty cool. But what's interesting about this is, you know, and Juan, I don't know if you have a different perspective on this, and Nachiket, I'm very curious about your experience. A lot of data teams don't get that like hands-on and down in the deep with the business process to really understand, oh, there's a truck that got stranded somewhere and we're not capturing that event, right? They tend to be 1, 2, or 3 levels removed away from that kind of knowledge. And that hurts. It makes it difficult for organizations to solve some of these problems, and you start making estimates and guesstimations and things like that to be able to get around that. Is that something that data teams should be thinking more about how they do? And maybe the more that we lean on AI to do some parts of our job, maybe building tiger teams and getting your hands dirty with the business is something people need to spend more time on. I guess, how do you think about this way of spending time on the data team that I think is a little different than how data teams spend their time today?
Yeah, that's a great question. Right? I think data teams historically are meant to take the data from the source of records, do something with it, because the data at the source is not accurate the way you want to drive the insights, because that data is really driving the application features, not necessarily your data products and the data-driven insights and decisions. So that is that silo that has contributed to this kind of chasm in a way.
Yeah.
And then it's most of them are like more playing a reactive function, right? Like, hey, we need to build dashboards, we need to build models to drive certain insights. When they have seat at the table, when the new business requirements and the use cases are defined, that's when things can go real fast, right? And so that's where the process and the culture part also comes to the table. During my initial days, right, we were kind of federated. Like, there used to be a central data team, like we did not have chief data officer or analytics, But there used to be central data team that were federated into respective domains, right? The operations domain, the marketing domains, or customer domains. So that we got a little closer to that, but even within that domain, like for the large company, it's a big domain in itself. It's not a subdomain, right? It's its own little company with its own balance sheet and everything. So with that, we were able to kind of force ourselves to get engaged with the product managers and engineers. And like the background, I have a computer science background, and I've played roles in data all my life, but I understand the product side really well. I've built product and platform. So I was able to kind of drive and get the team shift left into this. And then I think where to your second part of the question is, what should be the future? I think where the future is going is you have this general purpose engineer, right? Everyone is building data products, right? Many of them are calling their warehouse tables as data products so that they can continue to support their BI related functions or data science related functions. But when you really build data products, you should think like a software product and bridge that gap, right? It should have similar analogy and similar connection. So that's where you should be sitting on the same table with the business when they come up with their software engineering features as well as the data product related features. Part of the culture change I did was actually I carved out a subset of my team and created embedded data engineers directly into the domains, right? And so now they are actually building the data products, the source data products for that domain or subdomain themselves. And they are following consistent standards that are driven by the data teams because the software or product teams don't know certain data practices. So that kind of governance, the true federated governance established with contracts and everything, also help drive this product first mindset.
Yeah, so that's a great perspective, and yeah, that resonates with me because I see a lot of companies where, even one example is there's a company that I know of that's trying to do a lot of like sales related insights, right? And the data comes from SAP, and then it goes in through like an Azure, or first it goes to SAP data warehouse, then it goes through an Azure pipeline and goes into a SQL server, and then it gets moved into Databricks, and then the data team is trying to work with the data in Databricks to try to clean it and make it make sense, right? And it's like, whoa, like at that point you're so far downstream, like you have to be thinking, oh, how do we shift left? How do we think about like how the meaning is captured, and we're thinking about the business process much further up this pipeline.
Yeah, and when you talk to those teams, right, when you escalate any issues when they come up, the team, like everyone has good intentions, and they say, oh, we can solve this problem. If you want this derived field, I can add that derived field in the SAP itself. Why are you doing all these transformations downstream, right? So it's just that gap that we have created. The more hands it touches, the data touches, the quality gets lower and lower, right? Mm-hmm. So that's precisely the problem I identified, and I created, hey, you have different personas. I simplified into just two basic personas. You are either a data producer or a data consumer for a use case. For a different use case, the same data producer could be a consumer, and consumer could be a producer. So that simplified the thing, right? And the governance, the ownership of the data kind of came, right? So when I connected the whole product and the business problems directly with the owners, we shifted left, as much left as possible, and helped them with the right guardrails.
Well, I think this goes back into the need to be able to understand this whole end-to-end visibility of how your business works, right? You sell furniture, like how do I get that furniture to all the way how it arrives to a customer? Understand that, but knowing that when you understand that entire flow itself of the actual product that you're selling, you're manufacturing, whatever, there is data and systems associated to so many different parts. And I think we don't create a map of all that stuff. So when you look at data teams who are then focused more on the analytical side, they're like, well, my world is pick your favorite data cloud provider, whatever, is like, that's my world. And they may even know that this stuff exists, or the most shift left for them is this stuff that is like the thing that came right before, right? And they're like, wait, no, there are actually 15 systems before and after that. And it's not that I don't want to blame anybody. It's not anybody's fault, but it's just like, it's a lack of visibility, of the end-to-end visibility. But then I think it's also we haven't realized that we should have that full visibility. And because coming up with that full visibility is an effort, it takes time and when you could say, well, all you're doing is just add out of the field, create a calculation, like that's quote
Well, and
unquote.
sometimes this is a byproduct of the org chart as well, right? Like, you may have a logistics analytics team or something like that, which deals with an upstream system, but then you have like the reporting team, which is downstream, and it's like, oh wait, shoot, maybe these teams should be talking to each other and working together on a combined roadmap and things like that.
Yeah, and that's exactly where the leadership should step in, right? Like they need to understand what's the overall problem at the program level or initiative level we are trying to solve. Like what is the business outcome? Because many times it gets lost in translation, right? The context, we're talking about the data and the context layer of the data, but the context in terms of organizational structure also matters a lot, right? We write a lot of our OKRs and initiatives and objectives, but they don't get cascaded down. So people are instructed to do certain work and they don't question the why and the what, right? If you just fill that gap, you can avoid a lot of the sprawl and handshaking that happens.
So let's dive into the whole change management and stuff, because I think this is one of those issues right there of knowing OKRs. Like this is something when people are like, how do I start? Well, like, I don't know. I think it's super. It sounds simple, or it's obvious, or I don't know. Like, what are your OKRs? Is the work that you're doing tied to your OKRs? You don't know what your OKRs are. Well, that's probably already the problem. Let's go figure out what those OKRs are. Like, how do you what's your experience around this stuff? Because I sometimes scratch my head. It's like this sounds kind of obvious, but it isn't. So I'm missing something.
Yeah, I think it's like you should ask those like 5 whys, right? Why am I doing this? Like, is it like KPIs? What if I have to get or build these dashboards, right? What am I building it for, right? What decisions we are trying to get out of it? If you are trying to get certain decisions, right? What that decisions are trying to drive in terms of our like high level, executive level drivers, the business outcome, right? Like, and ultimately it ties back to either increasing revenue or saving the cost.
Or the other one is like I'll say is mitigate risk. But the first two are the most important ones.
Exactly, right? So until you get to that point, right, you should keep asking those questions and now say, okay, how the work that I'm doing aligns to that top level OKR, right, that you hear from the executives. If you don't get it, like keep asking that question. So all the layers in between should be able to answer that question. If they don't, you have that assessment needs to happen and where is the leakage that's happening. Once you have that, there is project management and program management also, right? Like, I mean, we were not perfect. And then we worked ourselves, like I said earlier. Many times data teams are not in those conversations, right? Because they are always an afterthought that, hey, we built some product and now we have to measure, right? Because you come then you want to drive insights or measurement, but not at the time of building, right? So the left you go, you would be able to contribute proactively onto what changes needs to happen when you're deriving your top level epics, the roadmaps, the stories and whatnot, right? And then there is a team structure, right? So the people part also plays a role, like I say, right? Even though you are part of that centralized team, if you are not closer and creating that incentivized culture for the data producers that, hey, what's in it for me, right? My OKRs, my performance goals are to deliver features faster. If I'm delivering my features faster and data is not my problem, data is a byproduct, and there is data team who would take the data and massage it better for the insights, I'm not incentivized, right? So what I did when I did this like data producer and consumer, that, hey, if you own your own data, you will have less support. We will have this many less issues that will write back to this. You will have your downstream impact, right? Like, so the data contracts comes here to your earlier point, the lineage, the end-to-end part, most end-to-end lineage goes up to your data lake layer. Most of the time you lose that visibility from data lake to the SORs, right? I'm forcing it to go all the way there. And why can't that domain team, the product team, own their data? They can maintain their private data for their application, and they own their public data that needs to be enabled for analytics or AI agents or whatnot, right? So that's the mind shift as well as the organizational boundaries that needs to be changed. So we drove some of that through the flowchart, the processes, incorporate directly into our enterprise design review councils, right? A lot of that, like how you shift left and adopt that software first philosophy, and then start the change from there.
That makes sense. Maybe going back to this idea of Jarvis, right?
Mhm.
And trying to enable this for an organization. I'm curious about, a lot of folks ask, do I need to set my entire kind of data foundation before I can start to, you have some great diagrams in some of your posts where it's kind of like, the data foundation, and then there's, the sort of ontology layer that sits on top, the semantic layer, and then there's like insights and agent insights, and then all the way to the kind of the user experience. What is your perspective on how much of that foundation must be in place? Versus you can take more of a domain specific or a use case specific approach. How do you balance that?
Yeah, see, at this point, right, in 2026, I think most mature companies have some form of data layers, right? Whether they are solid, ready to go as the data foundations that I described or not, it's a different story. So you should have your data modernization effort, your cloud migration efforts, your like data layer foundational efforts going in parallel. But if you don't connect that to the business outcome, it's worth nothing, right? You will not get funding to continue doing that. At some point, it will stop, and all that effort will be at loss, right? So you should definitely anchor on the business use cases and outcome. So you should have that. And then this is where the leadership comes in, that you should keep your long-term vision and strategy in mind, that you need to build these layers, the foundations, the context layer and all that, while also executing and continue to solve the business problem and show the value so that you continue to kind of invest into this, right? It's an R&D investment effort without losing the track, but you are still continuing to show the business value and outcome.
So really acknowledging the fact that you're not going to build out that ontology and semantic layer like overnight, right? You need to get your quick wins, but then make sure that you're steering the boat in that direction.
Right.
And when you're building that out, should you pick out like a specific domain? Like a lot of your comments when you're talking about Wayfair revolved a lot around logistics and supply chain, right? And so, and there's probably even subdomains within that are, specific areas of high impact. Do you suggest kind of taking a similar approach that, obviously you've got kind of it's almost upside down T-shaped, right? You have kind of your broad based data layer that you're trying to service the business with, but then, do you pick like a vertical where, it's high impact?
Yeah. In other words, how do you avoid boiling the ocean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you should pick a domain or a subdomain, identify the true business problem. Again, like the examples I gave, right? The lost in transit, or there are like the other examples and use cases. Like you should align. This is where you go back to the OKRs as well. Like what problems we are trying to solve from the business perspective. Let's see how we can solve, because many times, like when we go into this circle of discussions, we overcomplicate things. The solutions, like I said, was simple in a way, but it takes a lot of circle efforts. So yes, you should absolutely start small, prove out the value, go a little bigger, continue to prove out the value, build that scale with your long-term vision and strategy in mind, right? Because part of this, like while you have strategy, the tools and vendors also come into play, right? So you need to have that long-term vision that I'm building this long-term foundation while solving this problem. So let's not muddy the water and boil the ocean with a lot of nuances and different tools.
Yeah, the episode we had recently with Juan Gorricho also is very similar to this, which is he calls it do it in slices, right? So I think at the end of the day, it's like you're gonna do that first use case that is going to be very impactful, and you're going to pay a little tax on that stuff, the foundations, but you're not going to do everything. You're just going to do just very little about that. And people are not going to be paying attention that much to the foundation. They're paying attention to the outcome that you have provided. They're like, that's great. And then you get more visibility to keep doing it again. And every time you do a little foundations, I think this is that is the very clear kind of what I see connects across all the data leaders that we speak to. It's that it's like tie it to the business to your OKRs, right? You start small. You're paying a little bit of a tax to the foundations. Don't even talk about it. Just go do that work, because just assume it's the minimal work that needs to be done. And then the next iteration you do, you're leveraging that foundation, and then building that foundation little by little just becomes part of how you do your work.
Yeah. When you solve problems, nobody's asks how you are solving it. Right? It's simple. It's just when the problems are not solved, that's when they want to get into the details to say, hey, what's working, what's not working. Let's uncover the
If you want people out of your business, solve business problems.
That's it. That's a t-shirt quote right there, right? When you solve problem, nobody asks how you actually solved it, because that's a fantastic point, because it's like when the problem isn't solved, then people are going to be asking, all right, what's going on, and dive into the details around here. So, but if your shit's working, you're solving problems, like keep it going, and you're like, well, let's make sure that you're doing something that is actually scaling. And I think the true value here goes back into I'm solving one specific problem, but the work that I'm doing is actually going to be reused for other problems that people may not see the connection to it. But that's the leadership that you bring in here, right? That's the 1 + 1 is greater than 2. That's what I always argue. Like, this is what semantics is for reusability and dealing also with the uncertainty.
Right. And that's like going back, like how I started my career, right? I was building a lot of customer data solutions for Fortune 500 customers, right? And that was very solution-oriented effort, right? There were no data engineers as job titles at that time, right? But they are data-oriented solutions in the marketing space, in the gaming space, and finance and all that, right? You are building solutions. Then the data warehouse, the cloud, like the Hadoop era, the big data era came, the cloud data warehouse, and data engineers and now we are talking ontology and AI agents and all that, right? But ultimately, you are solving the problems, and then you are connecting all of this to this like foundations. That technology, how you are solving, continues to evolve, right? Like today, we are talking about agents and orchestration and all that context layer. Something else will change in no time, right? Ultimately, what matters is what problems you are solving and how you get there.
Yeah, and then a pattern that I've seen here. I'm curious what else of you. What you're seeing is, I've been talking to a lot of companies that I see that they have already a very strong kind of semantic foundation, and then they're able, now with the AI and LLMs coming around, they were very easily, well, quote unquote easily, but they were already prepared to kind of jump into that, right? Because they're like, oh, we got that. When people realize, oh, we need context, we're like, wait, we already got the context around this stuff. We were building it for these other situations, and now it can be reused. And I think that's a pattern that I'm seeing, having this discussion with you. I've seen it from many other companies, they're the ones who people may think, oh, they're just jumping on the new context semantic bandwagon. It's like, no, we've actually been doing this for a long time. You said it yourself, you guys started over 4 years ago. That's a pattern that I'm seeing. So I know I'm curious. Talking to your colleagues, is this something you're seeing too? Like, well, how are you seeing this landscape with, as we started off, now ontology is such a popular thing. Like, how are you, when you talk to your folks, like, what are you seeing? How many people are just jumping into this new trend, or versus people who have actually been thinking about it, or versus doing?
I think it's mixed bag, right? There are the group of people who have been solving this problem, right, with data catalogs, with metadata layers, with the governance, right? And it really gets to how, to a certain extent, like if you have that foundation ready to go and you have not tied that foundation to a vendor which is really solving a specific problem, and they haven't evolved with the vision and with the industry, then it's difficult to get out of it. But versus if you tie yourself to a vendor who is also evolving, right, the tooling part, right? They used to be the data catalog, but now they are also enabling the context layer, the ontology-driven thing. They are giving you option to customize it, right? Ultimately, for your own enterprise, because that context layer, no vendor would give you 100% of what your enterprise business model is, right? All those events and everything. You need some form of customization ability, whether you keep it or you partner with that vendor. So that's where I think it makes a difference. You could, and that second cohort is really ready to go because they have thought through that long-term strategy, where the meaning, the business meaning, the identities of your core nouns and objects matter, and they kind of invested in that foundation instead of solving the problems that, hey, we need a data catalog, let's get whatever that the leader catalog is, and let's just solve the cataloging problem, right? They are solving those local problems, and they are not thinking long-term strategy of what data and the context can drive a lot of value for the business at the end of the day.
No, I think what's important here is that when it comes to vendors, is really to have your part. There should be partners. I think this is really the moment when you're going to realize what is true partnership. And I think part of the partnership is to understand how much of what is their vision and how is this tying to what they've done in the past and how that represents where they are today, and what are they saying which is in the future, or are they just tying themselves to the latest greatest thing that's just kind of been the now popular thing. And I think and I think also what we're seeing is that you want to be able to have these partners who acknowledge that, like, hey, the honest no BS is that we're all figuring this stuff out at the same time. I mean, right? We all have interesting positions and points of views and want to go do that, right? I think it's important. But like anybody selling you right now, the silver bullet, that is that's cool.
Yes.
Yes.
No, I'm 100%.
Yeah. One more question, and then Juan, anything if you have left before we go to our lightning round here, is how do you think about, and not naming any like names here, right? But like, how do you think about how vendors like software products and things like that, or cloud products are going to help with some of this stuff? Like I honed in on one part of your Insight Hub post that I thought was interesting, where you were like, no single vendor provides the Insight Hub out of the box, right? There's like some aspect that a BI tool can play, some that a feature store can play, some that a rules engine can play, right? So I'm curious, like, are there certain layers that you think vendors will help more with, but they're just fragmented, versus some that you think are they're less likely to help with, and you just got to like kind of take your matters into your own hands? How do you think about how vendors play?
It's a couple of ways, right? Number one, what's your culture? Tied back to your culture, right? Like if I talk like my Wayfair days, right, we were very build first culture, build versus buy culture. That changed over time, right? Build and borrow were the prevalent culture, right? Borrow means open source solutions, right? Compared to buy, because you have to go through a lot of kind of approvals and justifications to buy something, right? Because you need to have real good justification while you're buying.
Yeah.
There are other companies where they are very buy first, right? Because they don't have that product or engineering talent, and the way they kind of integrate everything is through that buying and integration among themselves. And that's where sometimes like you lose track of what you're going after, because now you have a lot of overlaps in the Venn diagram happening, right? So now who do you pick for the problems that you are trying to solve? That's the other problem. So my next point, that ultimately link it back to the business problems, the long-term problems that you are trying to solve, and identify the gaps you have, not the vendors have, what you have as the capabilities that you have to offer. If you are doing great on your data catalog offering with lineage and everything, and you're missing, let's say, a further shift left on the data contract piece, look for a partner who would help you solve that, compared to a partner who has done amazing job at like AI agenting work, but not much on the left side of the things, right? So it really depends on what problems you are trying to solve, how you do the capability matching, the matchmaking, and then make the decisions based on that. There is no silver bullet.
That's good advice. Like, look at yourself, understand where your gaps are and where your opportunities are. And, if a vendor fits that gap, great. If it doesn't, and then also look at your culture.
I like those. And I think the other thing that I've been seeing, I wonder what you think about it, is that companies really don't have a data problem. They don't have an AI problem. They really have is just a work problem, I mean, you describe your whole thing. Like, we had that trailer stuck in a place for a week and we didn't know, and that affected the like, that's a work problem that somebody, why did that happen? Because somebody probably didn't have to, they were supposed to fill out something and they didn't do it, like, because of whatever happened. Like, that's a work problem right there.
Yeah.
And I think the most we start understanding that companies, yeah, there's data involved, yeah, there's AI, yeah, there's knowledge semantics, but we have a work problem. So we really need to understand is how work is being done today. Where is that work happening, and what systems, and in what, literally what rooms and what environments physically people are, and kind of have empathy with the users, with the people around that stuff. And then you figure out, how do I take the more data to that work, more semantics to that work, more insights to that work, the governance to that work. I mean, and there's going to be a balance, right? Because you also probably don't want to think about having the gigantic monolith that's going to become the next mainframe system later on, right? So there's a balance, and I think optionality is kind of the name of the game now, because people don't want to swing. We had the pendulum for like monoliths. The pendulum went to the modern data stack, and we partitioned everything, and we're like, we don't want to go to the other side around, so we want to have some optionality around here. But at the end of the day, I think the point is, you have a work problem. Let's understand what that work problem is, and then figure out what data do we need to improve that work, what semantics we need, and so forth. Anyway, that's kind of my current soapbox. I'm curious what your take is on that.
I've said this before in public setting, that data is nobody's problem until you find a problem, and then it's everybody's problem. Right? So if everything goes well, nobody questions that data is wrong, something is wrong. It's data team who is doing their good job at doing everything, right? When something goes wrong, because there is in the organizational structure, the team name has data in it, it becomes that team's problem, right? So that's how the culture has been today, right? If you call that data team a BI team, they would kind of point fingers at another data team who is manipulating the data, right? The data team, if you kind of put it as like more upstream domain data specific expertise, like a product team with data, then it becomes their problem. But ultimately, it's an ownership problem. Right? You need to identify the right owners and how you are connecting the data on the ground, going back to our earlier conversations, the events and the work and what problem you're solving. And let's just connect that to the decisions that you have to make.
All right. This has been a fantastic conversation. Before we go to our takeaways, let's do our lightning round here. I'll kick it off. Number one, once we get at making Jarvis for enterprise, will dashboards be finally dead?
Good question. I think there will be still small flavor of dashboards that executives need on a recurring basis to make certain decisions that may exist. But most of the time, what happens is those dashboards don't answer all the questions they have. And the questions they ask during their QBRs and MBRs, their teams need to take actions and go back and try to find the answers and come back. I think a lot of that loop will go away, because you'll be able to have the dashboards and then ask the questions in real time. And there is an agent who is answering in real time. That's where Jarvis comes in. And Jarvis knows everything because it has that context layer, all the orchestration working underneath that, and it will give you that real-time answer, like how Iron Man is empowered with the Jarvis.
Oh, I like that. I actually hadn't associated it with this sort of like dashboard rebuild and sprawl loop that happens, because that's how you get like 25 dashboards that mean almost the same thing. Because like, well, somebody wanted it for the East region instead of the West region, right? And you didn't have a filter for it or whatever.
Or a double click, right? Like you had QBR, but hey, we need MBR because this next ELT layer need to prep for that, right? And then you summarize the top 10 KPIs on that dashboard out of 100. The next layer has 500 KPIs that needs to be summarized. So now
Jarvis
you're creating more visibility. Yeah. And then also beyond dashboards, you ask the why question. It can answer why questions, right? That's what I know, like where you spend a lot of cycles in trying to come up with that answer. And not only the why question, but also what might happen if you make these decisions, what might happen.
The what if scenario.
And what should we do?
Right. So that's where you kind of connect that loop back to the application. Ideally, I think the dashboards or whatnot should directly connect to the actual applications that end users are using, right? So if you are making certain decisions and your inventory goes low, it needs to be refilled, or more trailers needs to be added on a certain route, all that needs to be part of that same application, right? So the product becomes a general purpose product driven by an application product features as well as data product features.
That's the insight to action loop, right?
Yeah, right there.
Yeah. All right. We've been talking about data foundations, I feel like, as data teams and as data leaders for a long time. Do you see companies actually achieving that foundation?
I think so. I think data is going to be the moat, right? It's really how you design it and how you protect it, along with the context layer, is going to be the key, right? Data alone may not mean much, but if you attach that ontology, that meaning to the data and how you leverage it, that with those solid foundations, you can make your data engineering pipelines commoditized, right? Like everything can be automated to that, as well as the meaning that you extract out to drive the insights and decisions.
Love it.
All right. Next question. Is an ontology strictly required for agentic analytics insights?
Not necessarily. It's an overkill if you are solving one problem, one localized problem, right? And if you can solve that problem, great. This becomes more important and prevalent when it's an enterprise-wide issue, right? That you can really drive that meaning, that identity, and drive a much larger, more horizontal, the end-to-end problem. That's where you really need ontology.
And then final lightning round question. Will most enterprise employees be talking to their data by 2027? So that's next year.
Most percentage. That's
51%.
I think everyone is saying dashboards are dead, right? Like the semantic layer is like the past thing. So the way everyone is moving is definitely going in that direction. But I don't think that it will be gone completely. Like the example I gave, you still need something out of box that you can refresh and get a lot more answers. And then it's just that second level, third level questions that you need to answer. You need to kind of attach to that layer so that you get rid of that loop.
Yeah, I think that's well stated. And, there's something predictable about how, just picking on BI tools for a second, work today, where, there's a chart and you have chart types and you can click and you can drill down and there's something predictable there. And we're not quite there yet with the chatbot interfaces, but I'm sure we'll get there.
Yeah. And then you could have this Jarvis sitting on top of that can still answer the questions, even that first level questions, as well as second and third level questions. So yes, that can not be, maybe there is no future where there is keyboard, right? It's all voice, right? You are talking to your agent, right? Physical AI is hot right now, while we were talking about agentic. And now everyone would have that personal bot, not 2027, but 2030 maybe, right? And that's where you are getting your personal assistant that is giving you a lot more insights that you cannot get.
Then it's not just the enterprise Jarvis, it's your Jarvis and my Jarvis and Juan's Jarvis, right?
Yep.
Yeah. All right.
All right. Takeaway time. Tim, kick us off with takeaways.
Takeaways. So we started off with what is Jarvis for enterprise insights? And, Nachiket, you have some really, really great posts that you've put on LinkedIn that really break this down at a high level. And then you kind of look at each layer. And you said that this idea of Jarvis for enterprise insights, it really kind of started off when you were at Wayfair and you were socializing a lot of this internally, getting things moving there. And you decided to kind of put it out there. And it's really this idea that you need this data foundation, right? And there's lots of key aspects to setting a good, dependable data foundation. And you need an ontology layer, which is kind of the evolution of a semantic layer, but for the broader enterprise to enable this, Jarvis, like an Iron Man, right? And that's kind of, I think, the dream that we want to enable, not just for the data team, right? It's not for us; it's for the business. It's so that way, because it's just so natural to be able to interact with something conversational like that, right? And we've gotten a taste of it now with ChatGPT and those types of things. And you said that KPI definitions wasn't the main problem that was plaguing the organization that made it difficult to achieve this kind of Jarvis. It was really you had to get kind of boots on the ground, really connect with understanding the business to real world events. Like, why is that truck why did that truck get stuck and then it didn't pass that event on to the next thing? It's those types of things where you start to realize the messy reality versus the happy path that's in the system, so that you can have dependable, predictable, contractual, productized orientation around your data for these different use cases, for these different domains, consumer perspective and producer perspective, and then layer on, really critically, that ontology and semantic layer on top, so that you really treat meaning and knowledge like a first-class citizen. So what, right? You really need to make sure that you're focusing on business outcomes, and really thinking about how, when you connect with what's actually happening in the field, what problems are being faced, things like lost in transit, and then providing a solution for those problems. And data teams, they need to really think about how they embed in the domain, and how they really focus on the business outcome. And if there are broader problems like, for example, org issues or goal alignment issues, you mentioned that you really need leadership to step in. That's very important to really set, how you can do this properly across boundaries. Juan, what about you? What were your big takeaways?
So continue from there. You have the whole change management, right? Again, you need to know your OKRs. What is your company trying to accomplish, and be able to ask the 5 whys. Like, what is the decision that we're trying to go drive? And if you're not able to connect things to your top level OKR, you got to keep asking why. And once you actually are able to have that, project management is really important here, because one of the things that also happens is that data becomes an afterthought. So when the more left you go is when you can start contributing much more proactively around this. But one of the things that you'll encounter as teams is like, you need to understand the incentive cultures for data producers. So if the incentive is to just deliver more features faster, then data is not their objective, is not part of that. So we need to be able to understand how to turn that into an incentive, right? So if for example, the domain teams own their data, then it brings that accountability to them. Now, when it comes to like the approach of building Jarvis, you said most companies have some data layer, but you need some kind of foundational layer that provides that business value. And I think that's kind of everything we discussed here about the whole semantics being a 1 + 1 is greater than 2. Keep your long-term strategy in mind, but continue to iterate your way over there. Hit those small wins on the way. And how do you start and avoid boiling the ocean? Again, tie things to your OKRs and build that value, show it, keep it going little by little. You start iterating around this. And I love this quote: when you solve problems, nobody asks you how you solved it. When the problem isn't solved, that's when people start to ask questions. Then we touched a little bit about vendors, and it's interesting. I like how you said that now everybody's talking about semantics and ontologies. Right now, it's in the moment to start partnering with vendors who are actually who have been seeing this evolution, who have actually been part of that evolution, right? So it's like vendors really understanding that there's these concepts, nouns and objects, they have identities around that stuff, and people really understand that. And then when working with vendors, 2 things. 1, understand what is your culture. Are you a build culture, a build borrow culture, a buy first culture? And then also understand what truly are your problems, not the vendors, what they're trying to go solve. What are your problems? And find the vendors who support the problems that you have. So it's like a matchmaking situation. And at the end, I love what you said, data is nobody's problem. Until you have a problem, then data is everyone's problem.
Oh, perfectly summarized. I love it. And one final thing I would say is that, like, ontology being a buzz right now, right? It's not, AI didn't create that ontology problem, it exposed it, right? The shift left means we stop treating meaning as an afterthought, because in the AI first world, right, ambiguity compounds faster than compute.
I think that's an important insight, because I think a lot of times people, think like, oh, AI hallucinates, AI has a understanding problem, right? I mean, that's part of it, but really it's just it's taking an existing problem, an existing meaning problem that you have, and it's putting rocket fuel on it, and that's a problem we have to solve, regardless of whether there was AI or not.
Because until now, you were relying on the humans and their tribal knowledge and their context in their head that was not put on paper. And now you are expecting an AI agents to learn that, which was not taught at all. That's where the ontology and context becomes so important.
Exactly. We need to start kind of materializing this. All right, to wrap up quickly, what's your advice? Who should we invite next? And what resources do you follow?
Just give my advice, right? It's just like, don't call it an AI problem. It's really something bigger. So understand and pin down. Who should you invite next? That's an interesting question. Maybe the founder, right? I mean, Juan, you know much better than me, like somebody who probably thought of this, like with keeping this future in mind, like who invented ontology or knowledge graphs. And then if they had the vision of, hey, this could be the like sci-fi future that the Minority Report of the world that we have seen, if it would be good to kind of like get that insights from them when they first thought about the semantic web of the world. Right?
Well, what resources do you follow? Just to pin on that, this year at the Semantic Web Conference, I think it's its 25th year, which is also the 20th anniversary of the Semantic Web article. And the plan is to have, we'll have a special episode with hopefully all three: Tim Berners-Lee, James Hindler, and Orla Silla.
That's awesome. And I enjoyed your 20 lesson series, by the way. Great.
All right. And then finally, what resources do you follow?
A lot of blogs, right? LinkedIn post, podcast, your podcast, and popular one, like I've been listening to Pioneers of AI from Rana. There are a lot more, and I also try to follow some academic sources as well, and some top tech companies or innovators, their blogs and resources.
All right. Nachiket, this was thank you so much for taking us kind of through your lens of how you've seen the world, of how you've actually been actioning on all of this, because I think this is something really important that people are now actually just starting to work on this stuff. And it's like, hey, no, people have been doing this already for a while and had successes here. So people aren't just starting here from scratch. So
yeah, you've been working on this for 4+ years, right? And has it been cool to see how like the whole space is catching up to this thinking? And it's like, holy shit, I was right.
Gives a good feeling for sure. But it's a big change management, so don't underestimate that.
Oh,
yeah, don't underestimate change. Yeah.
All right. Well, cheers. Thank you for everything. And we'll see everybody live again next week. We'll have Sadia Haveri on next week. So 2 live episodes in a row. That hasn't happened in a long time. Cheers, everybody.
Listeners. Cheers.
Cheers.